Is Christian nationalism good or bad for our country? Is this Christian nationalism we see today really true to Christianity? And why is it so important to separate church from state? Hi, these are our questions and our topics of discussion in today's episode of Faith in Today's World. I'm Kevin Van Hall.
Hi, I'm Reverend Duke Lackey. Good questions, Kevin.
And we have a special guest joining us today. We have Reverend Joey Shelton, who is an expert in this subject. We talked to last week. If you hopefully you watched our podcast last week, listened to the podcast last week, when we introduced the subject, Christian nationalism. It's a touchy subject. People have been bouncing around it for quite a while yet, don't quite understand it, where the movement is going. We're trying to define it. We're trying to set the stage. We're not trying to push our opinions one way or the other. We're just trying to put the facts out there of what this movement really is, and this is why we brought in our expert. So, Dr. Shelton, can you please introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background, who you are?
Sure. I'm Joey Shelton. I am a native Mississippian. I've been in North Carolina now for about 3 years. My wife is the current resident bishop of the Raleigh Episcopal area of the United Methodist Church. So I retired and moved up here. I practiced law for 10 years in Mississippi. Then my wife and I attended Duke Divinity School together. After graduating from Duke, we went back to Mississippi. We eventually went back to Duke as the field education directors. Then we went back to Mississippi. I served 10 years at a large membership United Methodist Church in the state capital and across the street from the Capitol building. So there was plenty of demonstration going on a daily basis almost. And then my last appointment was as the dean of the chapel, director of church relations, and the Center for Ministry at Millsaps College, which is a Methodist-related college where I was on faculty and staff, and taught courses and hot-button issues through a Wesleyan lens. And one of the courses that I designed and taught was Christian nationalism in the U.S.
Excellent.
So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
It's quite diverse in the law and then divinity. Unfortunately, I have two Dukies against me, a Wolfpacker from NC State. It seems everyone's a Dookie around here.
I'm red today, which I'm with you today, baby.
I appreciate that, Duke. So last week we tried to introduce this topic. We tried to define Christian nationalism. We tried to define and even separate it from patriotism, which so many people think of this nationalist movement is a patriotic movement, and it's different. It's really not. Dr. Shelton here and Dr. Reverend, both of you guys have been practicing and preaching.
You can just
South.
call me Joey.
Joey, okay, I appreciate it. Both of y'all are from the South. I originally was born up north, a Catholic. I bring a different perspective. You guys are buried deep into this Southern religion and both United Methodist. So, Joey, when you say through a Wesleyan lens, you're saying from a United Methodist perspective of looking at things, and that's pretty much how we approach things, is it not, Duke? How we pretty much have.
I that's who I am. I can't but help look through that. Lifelong Methodist. That's just kind of how I see the world. So, but I choose to see the world that way. I've studied other things, but I choose to see that Wesley has a way of understanding Jesus that is life-giving.
So that's what this podcast is going to mainly be centered on, is that perspective of looking at Christian nationalism through that lens, as Joey puts it. So Joey, both of y'all, Mississippi, North Carolina aspect, Christian nationalism, was it also born in the South?
Christian nationalism has been a part of the vernacular, not necessarily in the same way that we're having the conversation, since before the country was founded.
Really?
If you think about if you think about the state of Massachusetts, the colony, when it was a colony, it had in its constitution that it was to be a Puritan colony. So, in one form or another, there has always been this bent by certain people to control society and government by their religion.
So it's a misperception. A lot of people think this Christian nationalism movement is started in the South, and you're saying it was in the original, I guess, charters of the colonies. But then when the Constitution was written, it was written in a little bit different way, was it not?
Yes, the Constitution, think about this. What was the impetus of the 100 Years' War in Europe? That was all Christians killing Christians or
Right.
the merger of religion and state. That's what it was. They all had their different ideas of Christianity, not just religion, but Christianity
Right.
specifically. And power and Christianity needed to be merged to control the people. So we have a 100 Years' War. These guys know the danger of merging state and religion. Henry VIII was, by the act of supremacy, the head of the state and
And
the
the church.
religion
Yeah.
of England. They
Yes.
knew all about the dangers of this. And so the Constitution itself, in reality, was very aspirational in wanting to make sure that white males had equal footing with each other.
Okay.
It
Okay.
left out the
Wow.
Native
Okay. Okay.
Americans, it left out the women, it left out the slaves, all of that. But in the aspirations of these white males, this is what they felt like from their social context, their social location, was an inspired document. And
Yeah,
so
that's brilliant. I never those so the white males weren't univocal. They had their own structure and wanted their own power. So the Constitution was designed so that they could figure out how to share power without killing each other.
that's right.
But they left out everybody else.
That's right. And they wanted to be able to make
Brilliant.
sure that all of them had the choice to be a deist, which many of them were, or a Christian, which could mean Catholic or Protestant, or a non believer.
Right.
Or
So
like you
most
said, Puritans, you brought up Puritans. Quakers also came in, settled up into the Northeast. So it was a melting pot in the sense of
and
these
there
people were being persecuted in Europe for their religions, could come to America and practice it. So our original founding fathers never saw a world, let's put it to history perspective, where um, the male was not in power. The male had always been in power over women, and through Europe they came and they saw that the white man was in power. Slavery was always an issue. You can go back to biblical times when Paul talks about slaves being submissive. Paul could probably never see a world where slaves were not involved. Okay, and in the Jewish structure, our original founding fathers, all they'd ever seen was a horse and a cart. They could not have imagined where we would be. So there was never a way to define it, or a need to set aside that, oh, it was only white males or property owners that were doing this, because it was assumed that's all it was ever going to be. You were never going to have women in a position of power. You were never going to have people of color in a position of power, minorities. So there was really no need to adjust them. So even when you're saying equality for everyone, you're really just speaking of different white males or different people of power, money, because you never assumed that the other would ever
was going to have
gain
power.
in a position of power. So when these traditionalists want to take us back to make it back to where it was, this is basically a supremacist movement in the white male. Then it's sort of what it sounds like. Then is it not, Joey? Can you define it? What this Christian nationalism is today now through this Wesleyan lens?
You said that it's always been a white male conversation,
Yes.
basically.
Is that what the Christian nationalist movement is it now? It's basically return and trying to put us back to that white male supremacy or in power?
Certain strands of it are, but
Okay.
not all.
Not okay.
Okay.
In your last episode, you talked about the Seven Mountains Mandate, which is a dominionist strand of Christian nationalism, and the different strands of Christian nationalism are kind of like denominational things. They're different. You know, a Wesleyan such as ourselves, we see uh, love of God and neighbor and social holiness is very, very important to us, and we believe in free will. Whereas there are those who ascribe to double predestination and that God has ordained every single uh, action that happens in the world. Um, the thing is that God being God, God has the power to limit God's self so that we can choose to love God and choose to love neighbor or not. And there have been times that human behavior has seen the better angels, and there have been times where they have not. So, in your last episode, you talked about how oftentimes when we need these power structures, we have to create um, systems that make sure that certain ways of life are preserved. And the ways of life are preserved not only for those in power, but for those who are lower on the food chain. And that's why we have the legalization in Virginia of uh, slavery to children born to slaves. That what it was. We're gonna not only is the slave our chattel, but if they have a child, that child is chattel. So we create systems to make sure that we are able to keep certain things in the status quo. And it goes all the way back to the doctrine of discovery, where the church gave the power to the state to conquer unchristian lands. Either they become a Christian or you
Or
conquer them,
right.
period. And that was adopted not only by the Spaniards, but in the English Reformation. And so we inherited this concept that we are in power and we can do all kinds of things in the name of the Trinity, which includes Holocaust and slavery. So our DNA has some pretty
Wow.
bad
Yeah.
stuff in it.
Right. Right.
And so when we're talking about the women or others today, in today's world, uh, I, there's another strand of Christian nationalism, which is about going back to the traditionalism that you're talking about, and it's typically made up of very, very conservative Catholics who would even want to go back to the Latin Mass, and very, very conservative Calvinists. And they would be the ones who would say, we do not want women. But the Dominionists have a lot of Pentecostals. And we even have a woman who is in the White House as the head of the White House Faith Office. And so at the end of the day, you've got Christian nationalists who want to control all areas of society, but they don't have 100% agreement on every issue. And at the end of the day, which strand of Christian nationalism makes the decision of what is a Christian, who is a Christian, and what is the power that that Christian has? Because if you go back to England, if you were Church of England, you had certain rights and privileges. If you were not, you were a nonconformist, and you had
That's right.
you had a social penalty to pay for that. And I don't think we can get away from the DNA of our supremacy of white people, especially white males, which I'm one of, and I have benefited from every system that has been created for that.
Yep.
I am an ancestor of slaveholders who and I'm an ancestor of people who benefited from Jim Crow, all of that. But I have to work out my own salvation with fear and trembling. And so without judging whether there has been salvation for my ancestors or not, I'm looking at a world right now where some people say history repeats itself. I would argue more in line with Mark Twain and his paraphrase of, or a paraphrase of him, to say it's not necessarily that history repeats itself, it's that human behavior repeats itself.
Right.
And so we're seeing, as a result of Barack Obama being elected as president, this is fear driven by whites who ascribe to certain historical myths, and they ascribe to new myths, such as the great replacement theory. And that's the backlash against immigration, is that, oh, white people, there's this conspiracy that if we let in all these non-whites into the U.S., then we're not going to be the majority anymore. So if we're not going to be the majority anymore, oh, well, what do? We get rid of the Voting
People killing.
Rights Act of 1965. And we gerrymander again voting districts so that we always keep people in power who are just like us.
So there's so race is really at the heart of this.
That's my argument, and I believe that's the historical argument for
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I think I just wanted to reiterate that to make sure we hear it clear.
So then, is it called a Christian nationalism movement just to pull in additional people into your racist movement, and by pulling on their heartstrings and saying, "Well, aren't you a Christian?" I mean, this is the argument I hear all the time of, "Why don't you support our movement?" Well, either you don't love our country, or you're not a Christian, and people don't want to say no to either one of those.
It's a hijacking of language. And let me give you an example. Here in North Carolina, a United Methodist pastor did a series on love your neighbor. Okay?
Yeah. So pretty controversial in the church.
Yeah. So as part of the series, the church, after church one Sunday, they gave out yard signs that said, love your neighbor. And the senior pastor was standing there, and one of his members came up, and he was going to hand him a love your neighbor sign. And his member, United Methodist member, said, I would never put that in my yard. And he said, really? Well, why is that? It's too woke.
Yep.
All right. So what is the origin of the word woke?
It's African American church.
It actually came from an African American musician who wrote a song about these teenagers who had been arrested in Alabama wrongfully regarding a rape. And what he did is he wrote this song about stay awake to injustice.
It's just a slang
Stay
word for
awake
past
to
tense
injustice.
of wait.
And he used the term in an interview, woke. And so it used to be just a very academic kind of conversation, but now politicians were able to take it and prejudice the word to say you're woke if you love your neighbor.
Right, right, right.
And that's because you don't want to, you want to give the sense, code language. You don't want to love those black people,
Yep,
and you don't
yep.
want them to be your neighbor.
Yeah. So we talked
And
about it
that,
on a podcast before. We tried to talk a little bit about social injustices going on in the world. Woke. We talked about how it basically it means you are awake. You see the racial injustice, social injustice in the world versus turning a blind
yeah.
eye, which it
And
seems like Christian nationalists still want us to do.
right. How many times did Jesus say, "Wake up"? How many parables said, "Stay awake"?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
it's yeah. It's
yeah,
I like
yeah,
your term, the hijacking of language.
yeah,
That's
and that's why, I mean, like now
happens
somebody will
all the
say,
time.
"Are you a Christian?" And I'm like, I believe in Jesus Christ as and the Holy Trinity, and I believe in the birth, life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so that's my definition of Christian, to answer your question, Kevin. And then when you define nationalism, you guys have already done a very good job of that. It's to make sure that those who you perceive as part of your nation, which doesn't necessarily mean even everybody in your nation, but those you perceive as truly American are preferred to the detriment even of folks from other nations. So there's this exclusionary aspect. And the reason that Christian and nationalism, in my take, are mutually exclusive terms are because Jesus is about inclusive love, and Christian and nationalism is about exclusive love.
You just mentioned that right there. I mean, part of the Christian nationalism, three idols of maintaining and getting what they want is one of them is exclusion and violence, establishing us versus them boundaries that leaves non-Christians or cultural minorities feeling like second-class participants in civil life. So there's that push. It's actually a very strong movement that they've learned this. The other two idols, one being fear, relying on the narrative that cultural influence is slipping and that the wrong people are taking over. You talked about that, Joey. Now we see this population shift as white people are having less children and those of color have come in, immigrating into the country and are having, even though a lot of the people that are coming from Central South America, Mexico are Christians. They're Catholic. We still got to vilify them. And then the third is power, seeking control of a top-down government structure, all the way from the presidency to the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be independent. Yeah, right. To force compliance rather than relying on the seven-herded influence of the gospel. So instead of following the gospel, we are using power, exclusion, and fear, and then we call it Christian nationalism. Who named this thing movement Christian nationalism? Because it's a nationalistic, white nationalistic movement. It is there's no Christianity or believers of teachings
Right.
of behind this. So where did we gain this? Where did we merge these? You just talked about hijacking of religion. When was it first defined as a Christian nationalism?
Well, I think that I don't know if there's somebody who can copyright the
Yeah.
term
Yeah.
Christian nationalist. Um, I, I I think it this human behavior and the need for power. Let's 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 do this. There in the United Methodist liturgy for baptism, we say that we will resist evil in whatever forms it presents itself, and that part of that is to resist oppression in whatever form it presents itself. So if you look at what's happening right now with oppression of people and rights, let's ask this question when we're talking about top down. Salvation theology wants to look at the fall when Adam and Eve ate the apple, that the sin that has created the need for salvation was disobedience. The narrative needs to change on that, because disobedience means that there is somebody at the top of the food chain that you have to be obedient to. And when you merge church and state, who do you have to be obedient to ultimately?
The higher powers. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So if we look at that original sin as having that which doesn't belong to you, we're looking at greed.
Ooh.
Greed as the sin that threatens salvation. And this greed always leads to all the other stuff.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
oppression.
Yep. Yep.
Greed leads to oppression. Greed leads to disobedience. This and so when you look at that it's greed that is the human behavior part that's driving all of this, then we have to go not from top down, but from grassroots level to say, hey, this is wrong. This oppression is wrong. This oppression, this abuse, this neglect is harming all of us. How do we get into God's will of loving God and loving neighbor? Oh, it's by resisting evil and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves. And so, as a United Methodist, that changes the narrative for me.
Well, your history, go look back, you want to look at it at a Wesleyan lens. Duke and Joey, where was John Wesley's position on slavery when he came over here to America, and how well was that received?
Yeah. Yeah. You start making money, don't mess up my income.
Have you ever read his treatise on slavery?
No, I have
If you haven't, Google it, read it. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's
So
phenomenal. And what he says in it is that the slavery in the colonies is the worst humanity has ever known. And his last letter before he died, he wrote to Wilberforce, the politician in England who ultimately was the driving force behind the abolition of slavery in England and the slave trade with the British, saying, if you take this on and God hasn't called you to it, it will kill you.
right.
Paraphrase.
Right.
But
Right.
if God has called you to it, you must do it. And that was his way of encouraging and equipping Wilberforce. And that was the last letter he ever wrote.
Yeah. So, Joey, real quick, we're at time's up, but real quick, you mentioned the joining of religion and nation, how dangerous that is, and and everybody knows how dangerous that is. The Christian nationalists understand how dangerous that is. I've always said when you combine church and state, uh, people are going to die, and well, as long as it's the right people dying, I can go along with it. And the brilliance of the American Constitution is that we had a balance of power where we didn't have to kill each other. But it seems like they forgot that if one side can kill, the other side can gain power and kill back. It's that desire for power and the willingness to use power to all extent to me is terrifying.
Well, scholars say if you look at the sociology behind the Christian nationalist movement, that it's about power,
Yeah.
order, and violence. Those in power are in charge of maintaining order and using violence when necessary.
Wow.
And so that's what we're seeing today. And what we have to remember is that if you take a test, they've got little things that you could take to show whether or not you're bent towards the idolatry of Christian nationalism. And there are a lot of African Americans who would say they're Christian nationalists, but they are not the same type of a Christian nationalist, generally speaking, as the white one, because they believe in the aspirations of the Constitution. And so when you have, I doubt that you would, let me see how to phrase this. The letter, all right, Mike Johnson has referred to separation of church and state as a lie, that it's not found in the Constitution. That is wrong. It doesn't say the word separation of church and state, but it is clearly
The
there
concept is
in the
absolutely there.
Constitution. Okay. The letter that he's referring to was a letter written by Thomas Jefferson to a group of Baptists in the Northeast who were afraid of persecution. Jefferson knew very well Baptists had been persecuted in Virginia, which was a colony that ascribed to the Church of England mainly. Okay, so these Baptists are concerned, and Jefferson writes this letter to say, don't worry about having a national religion. We have ensured that will not happen. We have ensured the separation of church and state. That's the letter they're talking
Yeah.
about.
And it actually uses the term the wall, build a wall between church and state.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So we're in a misinformation age. And
goal,
we get the misinformation off of from what supposedly are trusted institutions are giving us a lot of misinformation, and that's not anything that's new.
No, it's not.
so
The fascists have learned in the playbook the way that they gain the masses is through propaganda. You can look at history and everything else. You control the media and you control with the propaganda of what people hear and see and touch, then you can control the people we just talked about the power over. Go ahead,
So
Duke.
the goal for Christian nationalism is the accumulation of power over the following of the teachings and example of Jesus, or being shaped into the likeness of Christ. I thought the statement I make is you'll never hear Mike Johnson quote Jesus.
Right. And so think about this, because this is the thing that will happen. Why do we have different denominations?
Interpretation of Scripture.
Right. So,
Yeah.
you know, in Ireland, in our lifetime, Christians killed Christians.
Yep.
Because of power and mistreatment and things that had gone on. So now you got white people who are thinking, oh my gosh, what if the blacks treat us the way we treated them?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
If
right.
they are in the majority and they have all the voting power. And so there's this hidden, or not hidden, there's this subconscious fear that's there. And I believe that we've got to, as white people, be honest with our history and be honest with ourselves and not try to hide and doctor things, but to do what is called in the scriptures repentance.
Rest. Well, just look at South Africa. White people were scared of retributions and retaliations after the blacks would gain power, but you could see through Desmond Tutu and the rest that they took a Christian approach to it, of forgiveness and
Reconciliation.
redemption and reconciliation to prevent and to try to heal the nation. So yes, fear, power. We are running out of time. I'd love to continue
Wow.
this
Thank you,
discussion
Joey.
more.
Thank you so much. This has just been, wow, eye-opening, and really, really, thank you.
And
Thank you so very much.
I'd love to talk about it some more.
Yeah.
So our original questions here, I'll say, is Christian nationalism good or bad? I'll take a vote. I pretty much say I say it's bad. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure you agree with me that it's not a good
Yeah,
movement.
I've been thinking that for a long time.
Well, I think that we have to. I would like to say that the conversation we're having is from a United States of America context. You
Right.
know, I don't want to speak for other nations.
Good point.
I can't speak for other nations.
Right, right. But
So, in our context and in its current form and in what it's trying to do, I think it's very, very bad. When it's like with due process in the law, when one person loses due process, we all lose due process. And Kevin, we've lost it.
that's right.
I believe you.
And so when we deny religious freedom to one group of people, Duke, we have denied it to ourselves.
That's exactly right. Yep, yep. The dismantling of the voting rights of 65 hasn't just displaced persons of black people, brown people. I'm more in alignment with them than I am with the white supremacists. I've been displaced. I don't have a chance to have a representative that represents me.
Well, my Christianity doesn't allow me to follow this Christian national movement. I can't call it a Christian nationalist movement. It's just a white nationalist movement. We can pretty much all, I think, can agree on that. And the last part, I'll take your opinions here before we finish up today. Well, why is it so important to separate the church from the state? Are you going based on a history that we just cannot get along, what we just attack each other? I mean, I think that's, you talked about, Joey, our human behavior. We're just not going to, it works when we keep it separate. It doesn't work when we combine it, correct? I mean, you look at, we attack the Islamists if they do the Shia or a jihad law. I mean, are we any different if we let the zealots take over and control and run it than some of the other religious countries that are literally running themselves?
Let me put it this way. You talked about in your last podcast prayer in school. I can tell you there are Christian prayers being prayed today that are very, very harmful to many, many people. And so I think that we need to be very careful when we want to dictate who is a Christian and who is not. Because not all Christians agree on what that means. And to exclude our other brothers and sisters in the world, who, by the way, almost every major world religion, or I would say every major world religion, has the golden rule embedded in it.
Yep.
So I'm disturbed that there are all of these people that I think at the end of the day are driven by idolatry, which is driven by greed, that are seeking to take away the best aspirations of the United States Constitution.
Yeah.
And the rights that we've worked really hard in little baby steps to have for everybody. But I think that the better angels are going to eventually prevail. That's my prayer. I think that we have a God of resurrection who can redeem, who is always at work redeeming our messes.
Yeah.
And so that's my my hope. I think it's an opportunity, really. When we talk about salvation, I think it's an opportunity for us to recognize sin, repent of sin, to be forgiven, and to have new life.
So, Joey, if you could come back, I would love to have that a little deeper conversation. Maybe thinking about the clergy and their role as leaderships of churches. And man, as a retired clergy, it's taken me a year to realize how much I had walked a tightrope, trying to be everybody's pastor, and not saying what I felt need to be said. So I think I would love to have that conversation with you to say, how can we guide clergy in today's world?
Yeah, and I would close with saying that this Christian nationalism is not a religious movement. It's a political movement.
Amen. Thank you.
And this political movement has hijacked, again, the word Christian. And that's part of the propaganda, is to redefine what it means to be a Christian so that this movement that these nationalists are pursuing can be stomached by the masses.
Yeah. Yes. Well,
Just
Thank you, Joey.
yeah. Thank you so much, Duke and Joey, for being here today. Let's wrap up. I'd love to continue this discussion. And going forward, faith in today's world, where do we go from here? We've been defining it, talking about it quite a bit. So where do we go from here as individuals? Where do we go from, and where does the church's role going forward in this movement? Where are we supposed to, how should we go forward? How are we supposed to heal? And I think there's always a way forward. We always close our session with a little saying, a little question I always ask Duke, because I feel like it's a realistic point of view, but I also like to look at it the optimistic point of view as well, that we've been on the brink before and somehow we've been able to come back. So that's my hope, and that's my prayer, just like you talked about that. So Duke, I'll ask you this question. Is it ever too late?
It's never too late to do the right thing.
It's never too late. We got to go forward and do the right thing. Joey, thank you again so much for being here. Love the words of wisdom. Please come back and join us again. And all your listeners out there, please tune in next week when we try to bring Joey back again. So until there, goodbye, everyone.
Faith in today's world. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.